I stood outside the mahogany doors of Hartwell and Associates law firm, my hands trembling not from grief, but from rage. 3 days earlier, I'd overheard my daughter-in-law Victoria telling someone on the phone that she'd made sure I wouldn't see a penny of my wife, Eleanor's $83 million estate. After 42 years of marriage, after building that fortune together from nothing, Victoria thought she'd written me out of my own life. She had no idea what was coming. The morning sun cast long shadows across the cemetery as I watched the last of the mourners leave Eleanor's grave. My knees ached from standing so long, but physical pain was nothing compared to the hollow ache in my chest. 42 years we'd been together. 42 years since I'd met Eleanor Hartford at a community college in Springfield, both of us working nights to pay for our business degrees. I remember those early days like they happened yesterday. We'd started with a single assisted living facility in a rundown building on Maple Street. Eleanor had this vision about dignity in aging, about creating places where seniors could thrive, not just survive. We'd worked 18-hour days, 7 days a week. I handled the business side while Eleanor managed patient care with a compassion that made families trust us with their most precious loved ones. By our 10th anniversary, we owned 5 facilities. By our 20th, we had expanded across 3 states. The Hartford Senior Care Network became synonymous with quality and compassion. We'd built something remarkable together, brick by brick, patient by patient. The money followed naturally, but it was never about the money for us. It was about the mission, about the families we served, about building something that mattered. Thomas came along in our 5th year of marriage. Our miracle baby Eleanor called him after 3 miscarriages, nearly broke us. We raised him in the facilities surrounded by grandparent figures who doted on him. He learned to walk in the hallways of our first building, celebrated birthdays with residents who had no other visitors. I thought we'd raised him right, taught him the value of hard work and compassion. Then Victoria entered our lives 5 years ago. Thomas met her at a charity gala in Boston. She was working for a non-profit focused on elder care, or so she claimed. Beautiful, articulate, with degrees from impressive schools and a smile that could light up a room. Eleanor was skeptical from the start. There's something calculated about her smile, she'd told me after their first meeting. Like she's always measuring the value of things. But Thomas was smitten, and we wanted our son to be happy. They had a lavish wedding at the Ritz-Carlton. Victoria insisted on the best of everything, and Thomas seemed happy to provide it. That should have been our first real warning sign. The changes started slowly. Victoria would make subtle comments about how hard we were working at our age. "You've earned the right to relax," she'd say over Sunday dinners. "Let younger people handle the day-to-day operations." She introduced Thomas to new friends, all from wealthy families who lived off inherited money rather than earning it themselves. Eleanor noticed it first. "She's isolating him from us," she told me one night as we prepared for bed. "Have you noticed how he misses family dinners now? How he's always too busy when we need help with the business?" I'd dismissed her concerns initially. Thomas was building his own life, I reasoned. It was natural for children to create distance as they grew. But Eleanor's instincts had always been sharper than mine when it came to people. The real poison began about 2 years ago. Victoria started suggesting that Eleanor was becoming forgetful. "Did you notice how she repeated that story at dinner?" She'd whisper to Thomas, loud enough for others to hear. "Maybe we should have her evaluated. Early intervention is so important with dementia." Eleanor's mind was sharp as a surgical scalpel. At 71, she could recite financial figures from memory, remember the names of every patient in our facilities, and still outmaneuver our competitors in negotiations. But Victoria planted seeds of doubt with surgical precision. Then came the medications. Victoria recommended a Dr. Harold Brennan, a geriatric specialist with an office in the wealthiest part of town. She drove Eleanor to appointments, always insisting I was too busy with work to accompany them. Eleanor started taking pills for conditions she didn't have. Blood pressure medication that made her dizzy. Anti-anxiety drugs that clouded her thinking. Sleeping pills that left her groggy and confused. "I don't feel like myself," Eleanor confided one morning, her hands shaking as she tried to pour coffee. "Maybe Victoria's right. Maybe I am getting old." The woman who'd built an empire was being systematically diminished, and I was too blind to see it happening under my own roof. Everything changed 3 weeks ago. I'd come home early from a meeting, entering through the garage to avoid the rain. The house was quiet, but I heard voices from the study. Victoria's voice carried through the door. "The old fool has no idea," she was saying. "Eleanor's already taking enough medication to keep her confused. Dr. Brennan says another month and we can have her declared incompetent. Once she's out of the picture, Gray will be easy. Men his age always fall apart when they lose their wives." My blood turned to ice water in my veins. I pressed closer to the door. "The will is already drafted," Victoria continued. "Eleanor signed it last week. She doesn't remember, of course. The medication makes sure of that. $83 million, Anthony, and the old man won't see a penny of it." I backed away from the door, my mind racing. That night I installed hidden cameras throughout the house, tiny devices that looked like smoke detector components. What I discovered over the next week made my stomach turn. Victoria was drugging Eleanor's food. I watched her crush pills into Eleanor's morning oatmeal stir powder into her evening tea. She did it with casual efficiency, humming while she worked. Dr. Brennan visited the house, never examining Eleanor, but always leaving with an envelope of cash. I found the documents in Victoria's desk while she was out shopping. Medical evaluations declaring Eleanor mentally incompetent, dated, but not yet filed. Financial records showing suspicious transfers from our joint accounts. Most chilling of all, I found similar evaluations with my name on them, dated for the following month. The woman who smiled at me across the dinner table, who called me Dad with such apparent warmth, was planning to destroy everything Eleanor and I had built together. She was going to lock us away and steal our life's work. Eleanor died in her sleep 5 days later. The official cause was heart failure, but I knew better. The medications, the stress, the systematic destruction of her spirit had taken their toll. I held her hand as she took her last breath, whispering promises that I would protect what we'd built together. At the funeral, Victoria played the grieving daughter-in-law perfectly. She held Thomas while he wept genuine tears for the mother he'd allowed to slip away. She accepted condolences with grace, all while probably calculating the value of Eleanor's jewelry. Now, standing by Eleanor's grave, I made a decision. Victoria thought she was dealing with a grieving old man who would crumble without his wife. She had no idea who she was really dealing with. I hadn't built an empire by being weak. I hadn't survived 42 years in business by being naive. I pulled out my phone and scrolled to a number I'd saved but never thought I'd need to call. Marcus Sullivan, a private investigator recommended by my corporate attorney. Former FBI specialized in financial crimes and fraud. "Mr. Sullivan, this is Gray Hartford. I need your help with a delicate matter. How soon can we meet?" As I walked back to my car, I allowed myself a small smile. Victoria wanted to play games with a grieving old man. She was about to learn that some old men had spent decades learning how to win. Marcus Sullivan didn't look like the private investigators from movies. No trench coat or fedora, just a well-tailored navy suit, and eyes that seemed to catalog every detail of my study. We met at my downtown office away from the house, and Victoria's prying eyes. I'd told her I needed to handle some urgent business matters. She'd patted my hand sympathetically, probably already spending my money in her mind. "Tell me everything," Marcus said, setting a digital recorder on the desk between us. His voice carried the measured tone of someone who'd heard the worst of human nature and remained unshocked. I laid out the evidence methodically. The overheard conversation, the hidden camera footage, the forged medical documents. Marcus took notes in neat handwriting, occasionally asking for clarification. When I showed him the video of Victoria drugging Eleanor's food, his jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "This is criminal," he said quietly. "Elder abuse fraud, possibly murder. Why haven't you gone to the police?" "Because I need to know how deep this goes," I replied. "Victoria's not smart enough to orchestrate this alone. There are other players, and I want them all." Marcus nodded slowly. "You want justice, not just arrests." "I want them to lose everything," I said, surprising myself with the venom in my voice. The way they tried to take everything from me and Eleanor. Over the next 2 weeks, Marcus uncovered a web of deception that stunned even me. Victoria Thornton, as she called herself now, wasn't who she claimed to be. Her real name was Victoria Marsh, and she had a history that would make a con artist proud. "She's done this before," Marcus reported during one of our clandestine meetings at a diner outside the city. He slid a folder across the table. "Dorothy Chen in Colorado Springs, 4 years before she met your son. Widow worth $12 million. Victoria worked as her physical therapist, married her grandson, and within 18 months, Dorothy was in a memory care facility. And the money was gone." My coffee turned bitter in my mouth. "What happened to Dorothy? Died within 6 months of being institutionalized. Natural causes officially. The family tried to contest the will, but couldn't prove anything. And before that?" Marcus flipped to another section. "Robert Kim in Scottsdale. Retired tech executive worth $30 million. Victoria was dating his son, same pattern. Medications, mental incompetence claims, forged documents. He's still alive, but in a facility. His son committed suicide 2 years ago. Left a note saying he couldn't live with what he'd allowed to happen." The pattern was clear, horrifying in its repetition. Victoria was a predator who specialized in destroying families for money, and now she had her claws in mine. "There's more," Marcus continued. "She's working with someone, Anthony Russo. He poses as a financial advisor, helps move the money once she gets control. They've been partners for at least 7 years. He showed me surveillance photos of Victoria meeting with a distinguished-looking man in his 50s. They met at upscale restaurants in parking garages, always careful, but not careful enough for Marcus's trained eye. "He's been managing some of your wife's investment accounts for the past year," Marcus said. "Small transfers at first, testing the waters. In the past month, he's accelerated. Nearly $2 million has been moved to offshore accounts." $2 million. Money Eleanor and I had earned through decades of hard work, stolen by parasites, who contributed nothing to the world but misery. I maintained my facade at home, playing the role of the grieving widower to perfection. I shuffled when I walked, forgot names, repeated stories. Victoria's eyes would light up with satisfaction every time I showed confusion or weakness. She started leaving brochures for assisted living facilities around the house, always with concerned comments about my well-being. "I just want what's best for you, Dad." She'd say, her voice dripping with false sincerity. "Eleanor would want you to be somewhere safe." Thomas seemed oblivious to it all, lost in his own grief, and increasingly dependent on Victoria for emotional support. She'd isolated him beautifully, I realized. Cut him off from his parents, surrounded him with her influence, made him need her more than anyone else. Meanwhile, Marcus's investigation deepened. He discovered Victoria had been meeting with estate lawyers from a firm known for questionable practices. She'd presented them with a will supposedly signed by Eleanor 2 weeks before her death, leaving the bulk of the estate to Thomas and Victoria, with specific provisions that would give Victoria control if anything happened to Thomas. "The signature is good," Marcus admitted. "She must have practiced for months. But there's a problem with their plan." "What's that?" Marcus smiled for the first time since we'd met. "The lawyer she's using, David Forrester, is under investigation by the state bar. He doesn't know it yet, but his license is about to be suspended for commingling client funds. Every document he's prepared in the last 6 months will be subject to scrutiny. It was the first good news I'd had in weeks, but I knew we needed more." Victoria had been too careful, too practiced in her deception. We needed her to make a mistake. I want everything, I told Marcus. Every meeting, every phone call, every text message. I want to know what she eats for breakfast and what she dreams about at night. Marcus expanded his team. They followed Victoria like shadows, documenting her every move. What they discovered next changed everything. Victoria was having an affair with Dr. Brennan. The same doctor who'd been drugging my wife was sharing Victoria's bed twice a week while Thomas was at work. They met at a boutique hotel downtown, always the same room, always paid for in cash. But that wasn't the most shocking revelation. Marcus's team intercepted a phone conversation that made my blood boil. "Once the old man's gone, we disappear." Brennan's voice crackled through the recording. "The Cayman accounts are ready. New identities are arranged. 6 months from now, Victoria Thornton never existed." "What about Thomas?" Victoria's voice was cold, calculating. "What about him? He's served his purpose. Weak men always do." She laughed, then a sound like breaking glass. $83 million? Not bad for 5 years' work. Best score yet. Brennan agreed. "Though I'll miss the prescription access. These small-town pharmacies never ask questions." I listened to my son being dismissed like a used tissue, to my wife's death being called a score, and felt something crystallize inside me. This wasn't just about money anymore. This was about justice for Eleanor, salvation for Thomas, and protecting other families from these monsters. But even with all this evidence, I needed more. I needed them to incriminate themselves completely, irrefutably. And I knew exactly how to do it. I had Marcus's team create false financial documents, showing hidden accounts. I supposedly had accounts Victoria didn't know about. I left them in my study safe, the same safe I'd caught Victoria trying to open on the hidden cameras. The documents showed $15 million in offshore holdings, complete with account numbers and access codes. All fake, of course, but Victoria wouldn't know that until it was too late. Then I played my role even better. I started talking about Eleanor's special project, mumbling about safety deposit boxes and hidden assets when Victoria was within earshot. I watched her eyes sharpen with greed, even as she maintained her concerned expression. "Dad, you're confusing things," she'd say gently. "There are no hidden accounts. We have all of Eleanor's financial records." "Of course, dear," I'd reply, letting my eyes go vacant. "You must be right. I get so confused these days." But I'd see her later huddled over her laptop, searching bank records, making calls to financial institutions. The bait was set. Now I just had to wait for her to take it. Marcus called me late one evening with urgency in his voice. "She's moving faster. My sources say she's planning to have you declared incompetent next week. We need to accelerate our timeline." "How much do we have?" "Enough to destroy her, but we need to catch her in the act for it to be ironclad. The FBI won't move without absolutely bulletproof evidence." The FBI. I hadn't told Marcus, but I had my own ace in the hole there. My daughter Sarah, who Victoria believed worked in marketing in Seattle, had been an FBI agent specializing in elder fraud for the past 10 years. We'd kept her career secret at her request, a precaution in her line of work. Now that precaution would serve another purpose. "Set up a meeting," I told Marcus. "It's time to bring in reinforcements." As I hung up the phone, I looked at the photo of Eleanor on my desk. Her smile seemed to encourage me, to remind me of the steel beneath her gentle exterior. We'd built an empire together, survived challenges that would have broken lesser couples. I wouldn't let her legacy be destroyed by a parasite in designer clothing. Victoria thought she was playing chess with a senile old man. She was about to discover she'd been playing checkers while I'd been setting up a much bigger board. The will reading was in 5 days. Everything had to be perfect by then. Victoria wanted my wife's fortune, wanted to destroy everything we'd built together. Instead, I was going to give her exactly what she deserved. The revelation about Thomas nearly broke my resolve. Marcus's surveillance team had been following my son as part of their comprehensive investigation, and what they discovered felt like another death in the family. I sat in Marcus's secure office, staring at photographs that showed Thomas entering a downtown apartment building during lunch hours. Different days, same building, same furtive glances over his shoulder. The woman who met him at the door was Jennifer Walsh, his secretary at the investment firm where he worked. "How long?" I asked, my voice hollow. "6 months near as we can tell," Marcus replied gently. "Started right around the time your wife's health began declining more rapidly." The timing wasn't coincidental. While Victoria was poisoning his mother, Thomas was finding comfort in another woman's arms. The son Eleanor and I had raised with such hope, such values had become someone I didn't recognize. "There's more," Marcus said, sliding another folder across the desk. "We intercepted this email thread." I read Thomas's words to Jennifer, each sentence another nail in the coffin of my respect for him. He was planning to divorce Victoria once she secured the inheritance. He called her necessary but temporary. Praised Jennifer for being patient, promised her a life of luxury once he had his money. My son had become just another predator, using Victoria while she used him. They deserved each other except for one thing: Eleanor's money belonged to neither of them. "Does Victoria know?" I asked. "We don't believe so. She's too focused on her own plans with Brennan to notice Thomas's betrayal." A bitter irony. Everyone in this sordid drama was betraying everyone else, a circular firing squad of greed and deception. Except they'd all forgotten one crucial fact: the money they were fighting over wasn't theirs to take. That evening I made a phone call I'd been preparing for years. William Hartford, Eleanor's brother, and a federal judge in Connecticut, answered on the second ring. "Rj. Gray." His voice was heavy with sympathy. "I've been thinking about you. How are you holding up?" "I need to see you, William. It's about the Valencia Trust." There was a pause. "I'll clear my schedule. When can you get here?" The Valencia Trust? Even the name brought back memories. 5 years ago, right after Thomas announced his engagement to Victoria, Eleanor had pulled me aside with that look in her eyes that meant she'd been thinking deeply about something. "I don't trust her, Gray," she'd said simply. "Call it intuition, call it paranoia, but something about that woman sets off every alarm bell I have." We'd been in business long enough to trust Eleanor's instincts. That same week, we'd met with William and a team of estate lawyers. He trusted not the local firm we'd used for routine matters, but specialists in asset protection from Boston. The trust we created was a masterpiece of legal engineering. $60 million, the bulk of our liquid assets, placed in an irrevocable trust with William as the primary trustee. The beauty was in its invisibility. The assets were held offshore, completely legal, but complex enough that only the most sophisticated financial investigation would uncover them. More importantly, the trust had what the lawyers called a moral turpitude clause. Any beneficiary convicted of fraud, elder abuse, or financial crimes would forfeit their interest entirely. Eleanor had insisted on that provision. "If I'm wrong about Victoria, then no harm done," she'd said. "But if I'm right, this protects everything we've worked for." My brilliant, cautious wife. Even in death, she was still protecting our legacy. I drove to Connecticut the next morning, telling Victoria I was visiting Eleanor's grave. She'd hugged me with fake sympathy, probably calculating how many more days until she could have me declared incompetent. William's home office looked like a smaller version of his federal chambers, dark wood leather-bound books, an atmosphere of quiet authority. He'd aged since Eleanor's funeral grief, adding lines to his already distinguished face. "Tell me everything," he said, and I did. Every detail, every betrayal, every piece of evidence Marcus had gathered. William's expression grew stonier with each revelation. "Eleanor suspected this might happen," he said when I finished. "She made me promise to protect you if anything happened to her. I should have been more vigilant." "We have enough to stop Victoria," I said. "But I want to do more than stop her. I want to ensure she never does this to another family." William nodded slowly. "The trust is secure. She has no idea it exists, and even if she did, she couldn't touch it. The moral turpitude clause will ensure that. But we need to handle this carefully. If we reveal the trust too early, she might run. I have a plan for that. But I need your help with something else. I explained what I needed. William listened, occasionally asking questions, his judicial mind analyzing every angle. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair. "It's risky," he said, "but legal. Eleanor would have appreciated the poetry of it." We spent the next 3 hours reviewing the trust documents, confirming the arrangements we'd made 5 years earlier. The primary beneficiary was me, with provisions for Thomas, if he divorced Victoria, and underwent counseling. Eleanor had thought of everything, even anticipating that our son might need redemption rather than just inheritance. "There's something else," William said as I prepared to leave. He handed me a sealed envelope. "Eleanor gave me this last year. Said I should give it to you if anything suspicious happened to her." I opened it in my car, hands trembling. Eleanor's familiar handwriting filled the page. "My dearest Gray, if you're reading this, then my suspicions about Victoria were correct, and something has happened to me. Don't grieve too long, my love. We had 42 wonderful years, and that's more than most people get. I know you'll want revenge. That's your nature, to protect what's ours like the wolf you've always been. But remember that revenge without purpose is just destruction. Make sure that whatever you do serves a greater good. The trust will protect our financial legacy, but our true legacy is the thousands of families we've helped. Don't let my death destroy that. Use this situation to protect others. Turn our pain into purpose. I've made arrangements you don't know about. Sarah has been more than just our daughter. She's been our insurance policy. Trust her. Let her help you. She's been preparing for this possibility longer than you know. All my love forever and always, Eleanor. P.S. Check the safety deposit box at First National. Box 472. The key is in my jewelry box inside the locket you gave me for our first anniversary. I sat in that parking lot and cried for the first time since Eleanor's death. Cried for the woman who loved me enough to protect me from beyond the grave, who knew me well enough to guide my anger toward justice rather than mere vengeance. The next day, I visited First National Bank. The box contained more evidence recordings Eleanor had made of conversations with Victoria, documentation of the prescription drugs Victoria had been pushing on her, even a journal detailing her suspicions and observations. The final item in the box was a video recording on a USB drive. I watched it that night in my office, doors locked, blinds drawn. Eleanor sat in our bedroom looking tired but determined. "This is my official statement." She began, "Recorded on March 15th of this year. I am of sound mind and body despite what certain people in my life are trying to make others believe. I want to document what's happening to me in case something happens before I can stop it." She detailed everything: Victoria's manipulation, the unwanted medications, the attempts to isolate her from friends and family. She showed pill bottles read from medical reports, presented evidence with the same methodical precision she'd once used in business presentations. "I've taken steps to protect my husband and our legacy," she concluded. "But if something happens to me, I want the authorities to know that Victoria Thornton, my daughter-in-law, and Dr. Harold Brennan are responsible. They've been poisoning me slowly, trying to steal what my husband and I spent our lives building. Don't let them succeed." The video was witnessed by 3 people: William, Sarah, and James Hartwell, our family attorney. Eleanor had built an airtight case from beyond the grave. I made copies of everything, distributing them to secure locations. The will reading was now 3 days away, and all the pieces were falling into place. Victoria was about to learn what happened when you tried to destroy a family that had spent 42 years building defenses against predators. But first, I needed to talk to Sarah. My daughter had been playing a longer game than any of us, and it was time to combine our strategies. I called her from a burner phone Marcus had provided. "It's time," I said simply. "I'll be on the next flight," she replied. "Dad, are you ready for this? Your mother prepared us both. We're going to finish what she started." "Good. I've already briefed my team. We'll be ready to move the moment Victoria incriminates herself at the reading." As I hung up, I thought about the fortune Victoria was so desperate to steal. $83 million on paper, but she had no idea about the trust, no idea about the protections Eleanor had put in place. She was like a thief breaking into a bank vault, not realizing the real treasure had been moved years ago. The hidden fortune wasn't just about money. It was about Eleanor's foresight, Sarah's secret career, William's legal expertise, and decades of building relationships with people who valued integrity over greed. Victoria thought she was stealing from a weak old man. Instead, she was walking into a trap 42 years in the making. 3 more days. Then Eleanor's final plan would unfold, and Victoria would discover that some fortunes can't be stolen, only earned. And she had earned exactly what she deserved: complete and utter destruction. I arranged the family dinner for Saturday evening, 2 days before the will reading. The dining room hadn't seen a gathering since Eleanor's wake, and I made sure everything was perfect. The good china, Eleanor's favorite centerpiece of white roses, the crystal glasses that caught the light from the chandelier. If this was to be our last family dinner, I wanted it to be memorable. Victoria arrived early, as I knew she would. She wore a black dress that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary, her jewelry subtle but expensive. The grieving daughter-in-law perfectly presented. "Dad, you didn't have to go to all this trouble," she cooed, air-kissing my cheek. The scent of her perfume made my skin crawl, but I smiled warmly. "Eleanor would have wanted us to maintain traditions," I replied, letting my voice quaver slightly. Family was everything to her. I watched Victoria's eyes scan the room, probably calculating the value of each item. The silver serving set, the oil paintings, the Persian rug. All would be hers soon, or so she believed. Thomas arrived next, looking haggard despite his expensive suit. The stress of living multiple lies was showing. He hugged me stiffly, avoiding eye contact. "My son, the stranger. Jennifer's not feeling well," he said, explaining his secretary's absence before anyone asked. "She sends her regrets." "Of course," Victoria replied smoothly, though I caught the sharp glance she threw at Thomas. Even in her self-absorption, she'd noticed something off about her husband's behavior. Sarah's arrival changed the room's dynamic entirely. My daughter swept in from Seattle, looking every inch the successful professional. Her navy pantsuit was impeccably tailored, her bearing confident. No one would guess she had a Glock 19 concealed under that jacket and a federal badge in her pocket. "Dad," she said, warmly embracing me with genuine affection. Then turning to Victoria with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Victoria, you look well." "Sarah." Victoria's return smile was equally false. "I didn't expect you to make it. You're usually so busy with your marketing campaigns." "Family comes first," Sarah replied, "especially now." We gathered in the living room for cocktails. I played bartender, my hands only slightly unsteady as I mixed drinks. The shaking was real. Maintaining the facade of a broken old man while rage simmered beneath was taking its toll. "I've been going through Eleanor's things," I said, settling into my chair with carefully calculated difficulty. "Found the most interesting documents in her safety deposit box." Victoria's head snapped up. "Oh, what kind of documents?" "Old investment records, I think, from our early days. Eleanor always was meticulous about keeping records." I let confusion cloud my features. "Though some of it doesn't make sense. References to accounts I don't remember." I could practically see the wheels turning in Victoria's mind. Her fingers tightened on her wine glass. "Perhaps I could help you sort through them," she offered. "Financial documents can be so confusing, especially when you're grieving." "That's kind of you, dear. Maybe after dinner, if I can remember where I put them." I touched my temple, feigning a senior moment. I've been so forgetful lately. Sarah smoothly changed the subject, regaling us with a fictional story about a marketing campaign gone wrong. But I noticed her watching Victoria, cataloging every reaction, every tell. My daughter had inherited Eleanor's instincts and honed them into professional skill. Dinner was served by the catering company Eleanor always used. Roast beef with Yorkshire pudding, her favorite. I'd ordered it deliberately, wanting Victoria to sit in Eleanor's chair while eating Eleanor's preferred meal. The irony seemed lost on her as she complimented the food. "Remember when Mom tried to make Yorkshire pudding from scratch?" Thomas asked suddenly, the first genuine emotion I'd seen from him in months. The smoke alarm went off, and the fire department showed up. "Your mother laughed so hard she cried." I added, allowing real warmth into my voice. "Ordered pizza for the firefighters as an apology." "She was something special," Sarah said softly. "Yes." Victoria agreed, her tone perfectly pitched. "Such a wonderful woman. I miss her counsel so much." The lie was so smooth I almost admired her skill. Almost. As the main course was cleared, I began my performance in earnest. "You know I've been thinking about the business," I said, letting my words ramble. Eleanor had such plans. Expansion into Florida, she said. Or was it Arizona? She kept talking about sunshine and seniors. "Dad." Thomas interrupted gently. "The company's in good hands. The board of directors will manage everything." But Eleanor wanted family involvement. I insisted, adding a note of agitation to my voice. "She told me about special accounts for the expansion, said she'd put aside money where no one would think to look." Victoria leaned forward. "What kind of accounts, Dad?" "I don't know." I let frustration color my words. "She said something about the Caymans. Or was it Bermuda? Something about protecting assets from taxes. But that doesn't sound like Eleanor, does it?" "People do all sorts of things to protect wealth," Victoria said carefully. "It's quite common, actually. Do you have any documentation about these accounts?" Documentation. I blinked at her. "I suppose there must be. Eleanor documented everything. She used to joke that she had secrets hidden everywhere. In her jewelry box, in picture frames, even in recipe books." I saw Victoria make a mental note. Later, the hidden cameras would catch her searching all those places. "Speaking of jewelry," Sarah interjected, "what are the plans for Mom's collection? She had some beautiful pieces." "Oh, I couldn't bear to look at them," I said sadly. "Too many memories. It's all still in our bedroom safe. The combination is our anniversary date. Eleanor was sentimental that way." Another mental note from Victoria. I'd changed the safe combination the day after Eleanor's funeral, but Victoria wouldn't know that. The safe now contained fake documents about non-existent offshore accounts, complete with routing numbers and false balances totaling $15 million. Dessert was Eleanor's famous chocolate cake made from her secret recipe. As we ate, I continued dropping breadcrumbs, references to bank boxes at institutions across the city, mentions of Eleanor's rainy day fund, hints about investments in precious metals stored in private vaults. All fiction, all bait for the woman who sat in my wife's chair wearing jewelry bought with stolen money. I should probably hire someone to help me sort through everything, I mused. Eleanor's financial matters were so complex. She always said I was too trusting, that I needed to be more careful about who I let help with our money. "Family should help family," Victoria said firmly. "Thomas and I would be happy to assist. No need to bring in strangers." "You're so kind, dear." Eleanor always said, "What did she say about you?" I let my brow furrow. "I can't quite remember. Something about watching and waiting. Or was that about someone else?" Victoria's smile flickered momentarily. "I'm sure it was something positive. Eleanor and I were very close." Sarah made a small noise that might have been a suppressed laugh or a cough. "More cake, anyone." As the evening wound down, I made my final move. "Oh, I nearly forgot," I said, struggling to my feet. "Eleanor left something for each of you. Wait here." I returned with 3 envelopes, each labeled in Eleanor's handwriting. I'd written them myself, of course, having long ago mastered my wife's script for business purposes. But Victoria wouldn't know that. "She gave these to me last month." I lied smoothly. Said I should give them to you when the family was together again. Thomas opened his first. Inside was a photo of him as a baby in Eleanor's arms, and a brief note. Remember who you used to be. His face crumpled. Mom, he whispered. And for a moment I saw my real son beneath the stranger he'd become. Sarah's envelope contained a photo of her and Eleanor at her FBI Academy graduation, the one where Sarah wore civilian clothes to maintain her cover. The note read, "Truth always prevails." Victoria opened hers last. The photo showed her and Thomas's wedding day, Eleanor smiling beside them. The note was shortest. I know what you are. The color drained from Victoria's face before she forced another smile. How cryptic. Eleanor did love her mysteries. Yes, I agreed, watching her closely. She certainly did. The evening ended with stilted hugs and promises to see each other at the will reading. I stood at the window watching their cars disappear into the night. Victoria's BMW first speeding off to search for imaginary millions. Thomas's Mercedes next, probably heading to Jennifer's apartment. Sarah's rental car last, driving slowly, professionally, heading to coordinate with her FBI team. Alone in the house Eleanor and I had shared for 30 years, I poured myself a real drink. No shaking hands now, no confused elderly act. Just Gray Hartford widower and predator hunter preparing for the final act. I raised my glass to Eleanor's portrait above the fireplace. 2 days, my love, then your trap springs shut. In the study, my hidden cameras were already recording Victoria's frantic search through Eleanor's jewelry box. By morning, she would have torn apart half the house looking for clues to money that didn't exist. Let her search, let her scheme, let her think she was winning. Monday would bring revelations that would destroy her world. Eleanor's final gift wouldn't be money, but justice. And I would make sure Victoria received every penny of what she'd earned. Monday morning arrived with unseasonable warmth, the kind of false spring day that makes February in Massachusetts feel like a lie. I dressed carefully in my best charcoal suit, the one Eleanor had picked out for our 40th anniversary. My hands were steady as I knotted my tie, no trace of the shaking confusion I'd performed all week. I arrived at Hartwell & Associates an hour before the scheduled reading. The security guard, Paul, who'd known me for 20 years, waved me through with a sympathetic nod. The executive elevator whisked me to the top floor where James Hartwell waited in his corner office. James looked like Central Casting's idea of a prestigious attorney, silver-haired patrician features, wearing a 3-piece suit that probably cost more than most cars. But beneath the polish was a former federal prosecutor who'd sent corrupt judges to prison. Eleanor's cousin by marriage, he'd become family through choice rather than blood. Gray. He rose to shake my hand, his grip firm. Everything's prepared. The conference room is wired. 6 cameras, 3 audio recorders, I confirmed. All feeding to a secure server with real-time backup. Sarah's team has remote access. And our special guests? Agent Martinez and Agent Chen are positioned in the building across the street. They'll have visual on the conference room and can be here in under 3 minutes. James nodded approvingly. Your daughter runs a tight operation. Eleanor would be proud. Eleanor saw this coming, I replied. We're just executing her plan. We reviewed the documents one final time. The real will properly executed with video testimony. The trust documents secure and unassailable. The evidence packages ready for law enforcement. Everything Victoria had schemed for was about to slip through her fingers like sand. There's something else, James said, sliding a folder across his desk. Patricia brought this to my attention this morning. Patricia Coleman had been James's assistant for 15 years, a sharp-eyed woman who missed nothing. The folder contained records of attempted bribes, emails from Victoria offering consultation fees for information about the will-recorded phone calls, where she tried to sweet-talk her way into early access. Patricia played along beautifully, James continued. fed her just enough false information to keep her confident. Victoria believes the estate is worth $83 million in liquid assets, all going to Thomas and herself. How much does she think I'm getting? $100,000 in the house. She actually laughed when Patricia told her that. My jaw tightened. After 42 years of marriage, after building everything together, Victoria thought Eleanor would leave me table scraps. The insult burned, even though I knew it was false. There's a complication, James added. Victoria's bringing her own attorney, David Forrester. I smiled grimly. Marcus told me. His license was suspended Friday afternoon. He just doesn't know it yet. The Bar Association does work quickly when properly motivated, especially when provided with evidence of trust fund commingling. James's smile matched mine. He'll be arrested before lunch. 9:45. I positioned myself in the conference room, choosing Eleanor's favorite chair, where she'd sat for countless board meetings. The mahogany table gleamed fresh flowers adorned the sideboard, and morning light streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the harbor. I pulled out my phone, checking the hidden camera feeds. Everything was recording perfectly. In her hotel room across town, Sarah was suiting up her FBI badge, now prominently displayed. The trap was set. We just needed our prey to walk in. Patricia entered professional in her gray suit. Mr. Hartford, I'm so sorry for your loss. Eleanor was a remarkable woman. Thank you, Patricia, and thank you for your help with our special project. She gave me a conspiratorial smile. My pleasure. Anyone who tries to bribe me deserves what's coming. Shall I start escorting people in? Let them gather in the lobby first. I want Victoria to arrive feeling confident, surrounded by her allies. The next 15 minutes passed slowly. I used the time to center myself, to push down the rage that had sustained me since Eleanor's death. This wasn't about emotion anymore. It was about precision. At exactly 10 o'clock, Patricia opened the conference room doors. Victoria entered first, dressed in a designer black suit that managed to suggest mourning while displaying wealth. Her makeup was perfect, not a hair out of place. The grieving daughter-in-law ready to claim her prize. Behind her, David Forrester carried himself with the pompous air of a lawyer who thought he was smarter than everyone else. His suspension would be a beautiful surprise. Thomas followed, looking uncomfortable in his father's presence. He'd lost weight stress carving hollows in his cheeks. Anthony Russo came next, Victoria's financial advisor and secret partner. Handsome in a calculated way, with silver at his temples and a shark smile. He shook my hand with false sympathy, probably already planning how to launder my wife's money. Gray, he said smoothly. Terrible loss. Eleanor was a pillar of the community. Yes. I agreed, noting the Rolex on his wrist, the Italian leather shoes, all purchased with money stolen from other families. She certainly was. Sarah arrived last, deliberately late, making an entrance. She'd changed her entire bearing, no longer the casual daughter, but a federal agent with authority radiating from every step. Victoria's eyes narrowed at the transformation, the first crack in her confidence. Sorry I'm late, Sarah said, taking a seat directly across from Victoria. Traffic was murder. James entered with Patricia, who distributed water bottles and legal pads with practiced efficiency. James took his position at the head of the table, arranging documents with theatrical precision. Before we begin, James said formally, I need everyone to confirm their identity for the record. We'll be videotaping these proceedings for archival purposes. Is that really necessary? Forrester blustered. This is a simple will reading, not a deposition. Eleanor Hartford's estate is substantial, James replied coolly. We follow all protocols to prevent future challenges, unless you have an objection. Forrester subsided, probably thinking about his contingency fee. Victoria smiled reassuringly at Thomas, playing the supportive wife perfectly. Under the table, I saw her fingers drumming against her designer purse. Let's begin with some context, James said. Eleanor Hartford passed away 3 weeks ago leaving behind an estate of considerable value. She was preceded in death by her parents and had no siblings other than Judge William Hartford, who sends his regrets but couldn't attend due to federal court obligations. "Convenient," Victoria murmured just loud enough to be heard. James continued, as if she hadn't spoken. "Eleanor executed several wills during her lifetime, as is common for someone of her wealth. However, the controlling document is this one dated January of last year, properly witnessed and notarized." He held up a thick folder embossed with the firm's seal. Victoria leaned forward slightly, anticipation gleaming in her eyes. Beside her, Russo pulled out a calculator ready to compute his take. Before I read the specific bequests, James said, "I should note that Eleanor included a video message to be played at this time. Patricia—" The lights dimmed as a screen descended from the ceiling. Eleanor's face appeared larger than life, wearing the blue dress I'd bought her for Christmas. She looked directly at the camera at Victoria, with eyes that held steel beneath the warmth. "Hello, everyone." Eleanor began, her voice filling the room. "If you're watching this, then I'm gone, and you're all gathered to divide up what I left behind. But before James reads my will, I wanted to share some thoughts." She paused, seeming to look directly at each person. "Money does strange things to people. It reveals character, strips away pretense, shows who someone really is beneath the surface. Over my 71 years, I've seen families destroyed by greed, love, poisoned by avarice and trust, shattered by betrayal." Victoria shifted in her seat. Thomas stared at his mother's image with naked pain. Sarah watched Victoria like a hawk eyeing a mouse. But I've also seen money used for good," Eleanor continued. "To build something lasting, to help those in need, to create a legacy of compassion rather than greed. That's what Gray and I tried to do with our lives. We built more than a business. We built a family, a community, a purpose." The video Eleanor looked down, then back up with renewed intensity. "I want to thank most of you for being part of our lives. And for those of you here under false pretenses, well, I have surprises in store. James, please proceed with the reading." The screen went dark. In the silence that followed, I heard Victoria's breathing, quick and shallow. The game was about to begin, and somewhere beneath her confidence, she sensed danger. "Shall we begin with the minor bequests?" James asked, opening the will. "By all means," Victoria replied, her voice steady, despite the circumstances. I'm sure Eleanor remembered everyone who was loyal to her. The irony in her tone made my fists clench beneath the table. But I maintained my composure, the confused old man watching his wife's final wishes unfold. Inside, I counted down the minutes until Victoria's world imploded. James cleared his throat and began to read, his voice carrying the authority of law and justice. "I, Eleanor Marie Hartford, being of sound mind and body." The trap was set. The prey was seated. Now all that remained was to spring it shut. James read through the preliminary language with practiced precision, each word building toward the moment I'd been waiting for. Victoria sat forward, her manicured nails drumming silently on the table's surface. Beside her, Forrester took notes with self-important flourishes, unaware his legal career had ended 3 days ago. To the staff of Hartford Senior Care Network, who showed such dedication and compassion, I leave the sum of $500,000 to be divided equally among all employees with 5 or more years of service. James read. A generous bequest typical of Eleanor's thoughtfulness. Victoria's smile tightened slightly at money flowing away from the main estate. To the Alzheimer's Research Foundation, I leave $1 million in memory of my mother, who suffered from that terrible disease. Another $1 million gone. I watched Russo's fingers fly over his calculator, adjusting his estimates downward. To my beloved brother Judge William Hartford, I leave our mother's pearl necklace and the sum of $2 million with thanks for his wisdom and guidance throughout my life. Victoria's drumming grew more pronounced. Thomas shifted uncomfortably, probably calculating how much would be left for him. James paused, took a sip of water, then continued. Now we come to the primary distributions of the estate. The room held its breath. Victoria actually leaned forward, her mask of composure slipping to reveal naked greed. This was her moment, the payoff for 5 years of manipulation and murder. To my son, Thomas Gray, Hartford. James read, I leave the sum of $250,000. Thomas jerked as if slapped. What? Victoria's face went pale. That can't be right. Read it again. James regarded her coolly. I assure you, Mrs. Hartford, the figure is correct. Shall I continue? There must be more, Victoria insisted. Properties, investments, the business interests. If you'll allow me to finish, James said with icy politeness. He returned to the document. This bequest to my son is conditional upon his divorcing Victoria Thornton Hartford within 90 days of this reading. Should he fail to do so, the money reverts to the primary estate. The silence was deafening. Thomas stared at the will as if it might change if he looked hard enough. Victoria's mouth opened and closed like a landed fish. To Victoria, Thornton Hartford. James continued, his voice carrying a note of satisfaction. I leave the sum of $1, that being more than she deserves, but legally sufficient to prevent claims she was forgotten. This is insane! Victoria erupted from her chair. I was her daughter-in-law. I cared for her. Where's the rest of the money? Perhaps if you sit down we can address that, James suggested. Forrester stood as well, puffing up with manufactured outrage. This is clearly the product of undue influence. Eleanor Hartford was not in her right mind. We'll challenge this will and... Actually, Mr. Forrester. James interrupted. You won't be challenging anything. Patricia, would you please ask our guests to join us? The conference room door opened. 2 uniformed police officers entered, their presence immediately changing the room's dynamic. I, David Forrester, one officer asked. Yes, Forrester's bluster evaporated. You're under arrest for trust fund commingling fraud and practicing law with a suspended license. Please turn around and place your hands behind your back. As they cuffed him, Forrester sputtered protests about mistaken identity and administrative errors. Victoria watched her attorney being led away with growing panic. Now then, James said calmly, shall we continue? Victoria sank back into her chair, her face cycling through emotions. Rage, fear, calculation. Beside her, Russo had gone very still, the predator recognizing a trap. The bulk of my estate. James read, consisting of all remaining assets, properties, and business interests not otherwise designated, I leave to my beloved husband, Gray Hartford, with whom I built everything, and who deserves everything. No. Victoria's control shattered completely. That's impossible. I saw the will. Eleanor signed it 2 weeks before she died. Everything was supposed to go to Thomas and me. James smiled thinly. Ah yes, the forged will you presented to Mr. Forrester. We have some interesting video footage of you practicing Eleanor's signature. But we'll get to that momentarily. He pressed a button on the conference table. The screen descended again, this time showing security footage from a bank. There was Victoria hunched over a table in a private viewing room, signing Eleanor's name over and over on practice sheets. Rather dedicated forgery practice, Sarah observed. The FBI takes such things quite seriously. Victoria's head snapped toward my daughter. FBI, you work in marketing. Sarah smiled, reaching into her jacket to produce her badge. Special Agent Sarah Hartford, Financial Crimes Division. I specialize in elder fraud. Have for the past 10 years. The color drained from Victoria's face as the magnitude of her situation became clear. But James wasn't finished. There's more to the will, he announced. Eleanor was nothing if not thorough. Quote, however, I recognize that my instructions thus far may seem incomplete given the known assets of the Hartford estate. Therefore, I must now address the Valencia Trust. What trust? Victoria's voice cracked. The Valencia Trust. James explained with evident satisfaction, is an irrevocable trust established 5 years ago containing approximately $60 million in assets. Neither Thomas nor Victoria were ever beneficiaries of this trust. Russo spoke for the first time, his smooth voice tight with strain. That's impossible. I've reviewed all the Hartford financial records. No, I said, speaking for the first time since the reading began. You reviewed what we wanted you to see. All eyes turned to me. I straightened in my chair, the confused old man facade falling away like a discarded coat. You thought I was weak. I continued looking directly at Victoria. Thought grief had broken me. But Eleanor and I didn't build an empire by being naive. We knew what you were the day Thomas brought you home. Gray, Thomas started. Shut up, son. You lost the right to speak when you started cheating on your wife while she was poisoning your mother. Thomas went white. Victoria turned to stare at him with dawning comprehension. Oh yes, I said. I know about Jennifer, just like I know about you and Dr. Brennan, Victoria. Your afternoon appointments at the Riverside Hotel. Room 417, always paid in cash. How? Victoria whispered. The same way I know you've done this before. Dorothy Chen in Colorado Springs, Robert Kim in Scottsdale. Different names, same pattern. Find a wealthy family, marry, and eliminate the elders, steal everything. You can't prove any of that, Russo interjected. Sarah laughed. Actually, we can. We have video of Victoria drugging Eleanor's food. We have recordings of conspiracies to commit fraud. We have the forged medical documents, the fraudulent the stolen funds already transferred to offshore accounts. Speaking of Dr. Brennan, James added, he was arrested this morning at his home. He's already talking, trying to make a deal. Apparently loyalty among thieves isn't what it used to be. The conference room door opened again. This time Agent Martinez and Agent Chen entered, their FBI credentials visible. Victoria Thornton, also known as Victoria Marsh, also known as Victoria Stevens. You're under arrest for murder, elder abuse, fraud, forgery, and conspiracy. Agent Martinez announced, Anthony Russo, you're under arrest for fraud, money laundering, and conspiracy. You have the right to remain silent. As they read Miranda rights, Victoria's carefully constructed world crumbled. Her perfect makeup couldn't hide the rage twisting her features. You bastard, she snarled at me. You played me. No, I corrected. Eleanor played you. She saw through you from day one. Every move you made she anticipated. Every scheme you hatched she countered. You never had a chance. The video James announced isn't quite finished. On screen, Eleanor appeared again, this time sitting in our bedroom with the harbor visible through windows behind her. Victoria! Eleanor's recorded voice said, If you're watching this, then you're in handcuffs and your plans have failed. I want you to know that I knew. Every pill you put in my food, every lie you told my son, every dollar you tried to steal. I knew it all. Eleanor leaned forward, her eyes blazing with the strength Victoria had tried to medicate away. You killed me, yes. But in doing so, you signed your own warrant. Every crime you committed is documented, every conversation recorded, every transaction traced. I spent my last months building a case that would destroy you. Why? Victoria screamed at the screen. Why didn't you stop me? As if anticipating the question, Eleanor continued. Because stopping you wasn't enough. You would have just moved on to another family, destroyed other lives. No, you needed to be ended completely. So I let you poison me while I poisoned your future. My death is your conviction. My last gift to all the families you'll never destroy. The video ended with Eleanor smiling, that fierce, protective smile I'd fallen in love with 42 years ago. As the FBI agents led Victoria and Russo away, she turned back one last time. What about Thomas? He inherits now, right? James shook his head. The moral turpitude clause in the Valencia Trust is quite specific. Any beneficiary guilty of infidelity, conspiracy to commit fraud, or failure to protect family members forfeits all rights. Your husband's affair disqualifies him as thoroughly as your crimes disqualify you." Thomas buried his face in his hands. Everything he'd sacrificed his integrity for had evaporated. "However," I said quietly, "Eleanor believed in redemption. Thomas, if you cooperate with the FBI, testify truthfully, and undergo counseling, there's a trust fund that will activate in 5 years. Enough to start over, not enough to live without working. Your mother's final lesson." The room emptied slowly, leaving just James, Sarah, and me. Patricia entered with champagne, Eleanor's favorite brand. "She planned it all," James marveled. "Every detail, every contingency." "She was brilliant." Sarah agreed, pouring glasses. "Mom always said the best revenge was a life well lived, but she wasn't above orchestrating some poetic justice when needed." I raised my glass to Eleanor's portrait on the wall, painted at the height of our success. "To Eleanor Hartford, wife, mother, and the most dangerous woman I ever knew." We drank in silence, 3 people who'd loved her, honoring the woman who'd protected us even in death. Outside Boston Harbor sparkled in the afternoon sun, and somewhere Victoria was learning that orange jumpsuits didn't come in designer brands. Just as Eleanor had taught me, was a dish best served with proper documentation, and my brilliant wife had documented everything. The aftermath unfolded with the precision Eleanor would have appreciated. Within hours of the arrest, news crews gathered outside Hartwell and Associates, their cameras capturing Victoria and Russo's perp walk to the federal courthouse. Victoria tried to hide her face, but the images were everywhere by evening, the socialite daughter-in-law exposed as a serial predator. Sarah coordinated with her team from our home, transforming Eleanor's study into a temporary FBI command post. I watched her work with professional admiration, seeing Eleanor's determination reflected in our daughter's methodical pursuit of justice. Brennan flipped completely. Sarah reported reviewing files on her laptop. "He's providing everything dates drugs methods. Apparently, Victoria promised him $10 million when the estate cleared. He's claiming she manipulated him, of course." "Of course," I echoed. "What about the previous victims?" "Dorothy Chen's family in Colorado is filing civil charges. The Kim family in Arizona wants in on the criminal case. We're building a multi-state prosecution that will put Victoria away for life." Life. The word resonated with grim satisfaction. Victoria had stolen lives destroyed, families murdered for money. Now she'd spend whatever years remained to her in a federal cell. Thomas arrived that evening looking like a man who'd aged a decade in hours. His designer clothes were rumpled, his eyes red-rimmed. The son I'd raised stood before me, stripped of pretense and seeking something I wasn't sure I could give. "Dad," he began, then stopped, words failing. "Sit," I said simply. We faced each other across the kitchen table, where he'd eaten thousands of meals, where Eleanor had helped him with homework, where we'd celebrated acceptances to college and business school. Sacred ground now tainted by betrayal. "I didn't know," he said finally. "About Mom, about what Victoria was doing. I swear I didn't know." "But you knew you were cheating on your wife. You knew you were planning to divorce her for your secretary once you had your inheritance." He flinched. "Yes. You knew Victoria was encouraging your mother to take unnecessary medications. I thought Mom was just getting older. Victoria said the medications were helping. You thought what was convenient to think, just like you thought it was convenient to let Victoria handle your mother while you played with your mistress." Tears ran down his face. For the first time in years, I saw my son instead of the stranger he'd become. "I failed her. Failed you both." "Yes," I agreed. "You did." We sat in silence while coffee cooled between us. Finally, I spoke again. "Your mother believed in second chances. The trust fund I mentioned will be available in 5 years if you meet the conditions. Therapy, testimony, and genuine change. Not for my sake or your mother's, but for your own." "What about the business?" "Hartford Senior Care continues under the board's management. I'm establishing a foundation in your mother's name focused on preventing elder abuse. You'll have no role in either." He nodded, accepting the judgment. As he left, shoulders bowed with shame, I wondered if Eleanor's faith in redemption would prove justified. Time would tell. The trial began 6 months later. Federal prosecutors, armed with Eleanor's evidence and Sarah's investigation, presented a case that shocked even hardened court reporters. Victoria's pattern of predation stretched back 15 years, involving 5 families across 4 states. The litany of charges took 20 minutes to read. I testified on the 3rd day, describing our life together, the empire we'd built, the woman who'd tried to steal it. The prosecutor walked me through the discovery of Victoria's scheme, the hidden cameras, the investigation. But the most powerful moment came when they played Eleanor's final video in full. The courtroom fell silent as my wife, dead now 8 months, methodically detailed Victoria's crimes. She presented evidence with the same clarity she'd once used in board meetings, building an unassailable case from beyond the grave. Several jurors wiped away tears, as Eleanor described feeling her mind cloud from unnecessary drugs, knowing she was being poisoned, but choosing to endure it for the greater good. "I am dying," Eleanor's image said calmly. "Victoria Thornton is killing me slowly, carefully, with pharmaceutical precision. I choose to let her because my death will end her reign of terror. No more families will suffer. No more elders will die alone and confused while their wealth is stolen. My life for their justice seems a fair trade." Victoria's defense team tried everything. They claimed mental illness coercion by Russo manipulation by Brennan. They challenged the evidence as entrapment, argued Eleanor had orchestrated her own death to frame an innocent woman. The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours. Guilty on all counts. The sentencing hearing brought together families from across the country. Dorothy Chen's son spoke about finding his grandmother's confused final letters begging for help that came too late. Robert Kim's daughter described her father's tears as dementia. He didn't have stole his brilliant mind. Each story added weight to the scales of justice. Judge Patricia Lawson, a veteran of financial crime cases, delivered the sentence with measured authority. "Victoria Thornton Hartford, you've been found guilty of multiple counts of murder, elder abuse fraud, and conspiracy. Your crimes span years and states, leaving a trail of destroyed families and stolen lives. You targeted society's most vulnerable members with calculated cruelty." Victoria stood straight still, maintaining the facade of dignity in her orange jumpsuit. But her hands trembled as Judge Lawson continued. "For the murder of Eleanor Hartford, I sentence you to life without the possibility of parole. For the additional charges, sentences totaling 320 years to run concurrently. You will never walk free again." The gavel fell with finality. Victoria turned to look at me one last time, hatred burning in her eyes. I met her gaze steadily until the bailiffs led her away. Eleanor's justice was complete. Anthony Russo received 40 years, ensuring he'd die in prison. Dr. Brennan got 25 years and lost his medical license permanently. The network of corruption they'd built crumbled entirely, its architects buried under the weight of their crimes. With the trials concluded, I focused on Eleanor's true legacy. The Hartford Foundation for Elder Protection launched with $10 million in funding, offering resources for families suspecting abuse and training for caregivers to recognize warning signs. Sarah took a leave from the FBI to help establish protocols, bringing federal expertise to a private mission. The Foundation's first major initiative partnered with law enforcement agencies across the country, creating a database of elder fraud patterns and suspicious actors. Within a year, we'd helped identify and stop 3 similar schemes before they reached Victoria's level of devastation. Thomas completed his therapy requirements and testified truthfully in every proceeding. He divorced quietly, surrendering any claim to marital assets. His relationship with Jennifer ended when she realized the fortune she'd waited for didn't exist. He took a job with a nonprofit in Oregon, working with at-risk youth, trying to rebuild his character from the ground up. I kept my distance, but received regular reports. The therapist said he was making genuine progress confronting the greed and entitlement Victoria had nurtured. Perhaps Eleanor's faith in redemption wasn't misplaced. I hoped to find out in 5 years when his trust fund activated. As the first anniversary of Eleanor's death approached, I made a decision. The family home held too many memories, both beautiful and tainted. I donated it to the foundation to become a training center for elder care advocates. Let something good grow from the ground where evil had briefly flourished. I purchased a villa in Tuscany, the one Eleanor and I had dreamed of for retirement. The vineyard needed work, the house required renovation, but the view of the valley at sunset was exactly as we'd imagined. I threw myself into restoration, finding peace in physical labor and simple goals. Sarah visited monthly, bringing updates on the foundation's work and FBI cases inspired by our investigation. We'd walk the vineyard rows, planning expansions, and discussing Eleanor's vision for protecting vulnerable elders. My daughter had become the warrior Eleanor always knew she could be. On quiet evenings, I'd sit on the terrace with a glass of wine from grapes we'd never harvest together, watching the sun gild the Tuscan hills. I'd tell Eleanor about the day's work, the foundation's progress, the lives saved, because she'd sacrificed hers. Sometimes I could almost hear her voice on the warm breeze, approving and encouraging. The investigation had uncovered one final detail that brought everything full circle. Victoria's real name wasn't Marsh or Stevens, but Brennan. She was Dr. Harold Brennan's daughter, raised in a family that viewed others as marks to be exploited. The partnership between them was a twisted family business, father and daughter united in greed and cruelty. It explained so much: the medical knowledge, the pharmaceutical access, the practiced ease with which they'd destroyed families. Eleanor had faced not just a predator, but a legacy of predation. And she'd ended it forever. In my desk drawer, I kept Eleanor's final letter to me, the one William had delivered. Some nights when missing her became unbearable, I'd read her words again. Turn our pain into purpose. We had. The Hartford Foundation had investigated 47 cases in its first year, leading to 12 arrests and countless prevented tragedies. Elder care facilities nationwide implemented our security protocols. Families learned to recognize warning signs before tragedy struck. Victoria Thornton Hartford, prisoner number 427832, would die behind bars. But Eleanor Hartford's legacy would live forever in every elder protected, every family saved, every predator stopped. She'd turned her death into a shield for others, the ultimate act of love and sacrifice. As I write this, 3 years have passed since that day in the lawyer's office when justice prevailed. The vineyard is thriving, the foundation has expanded internationally, and Thomas sends letters describing his slow journey back to the man his mother believed he could be. I'm 70 now, alone, but not lonely, surrounded by the purpose Eleanor and I shared. When my time comes, I'll join her, knowing we won the final battle against those who prey on the vulnerable. The money they sought became the weapon that destroyed them. The woman they underestimated orchestrated their downfall from beyond the grave. To those watching who might face similar predators, remember this: document everything. Trust your instincts, protect your loved ones, and never ever underestimate the power of a patient heart seeking justice. Would you have had Eleanor's courage to sacrifice yourself to save others? How far would you go to protect your family's legacy from those who would steal it? Share your thoughts below, and please subscribe to hear more stories of justice triumphing over greed. Like this video if Eleanor's brilliant revenge inspired you, and share it with anyone who needs to know that predators can be stopped. Thank you for joining me on this journey of loss revelation and ultimate justice. May you never need Eleanor's courage, but if you do, may you find it within yourself to protect those you love. Until next time, remember, the greatest inheritance isn't money, but the wisdom to protect what truly matters. Stay vigilant, stay strong, and never let them see you coming.